controversial and thought-provoking movie. And probably the most controversial, thought-provoking point is the end. I've heard a lot of discussion between last night and this afternoon about what the end means, and I'd just like a definitive answer from the filmmaker. What does the end mean?
That means whatever you want it to mean. That's basically it. What it meant. You want to know what it meant to me?
Yes.
Basically the same thing. It means whatever you want, because I can live my life that way. But it came about because I was at a point in the shooting. I have another ending which I shot and everything, which is a very good ending. Worked very, very well. Shirley came down, went after him when he left the funeral and went down the trees. He was doing the same thing with a little plant, and she said she was where he was. She was very frightened. She'd been looking for him. He said, "I was looking for you too, Eve." And then they just walk off together, which worked very well. But I was working with a writer on one of the Sundays that I had back there, and a guy by the name of Rudy Wurlitzer, who was really interested in the film. So we progressed in the afternoon talking about this film. And I said, because of the way that Peter was playing this film, I always knew what we were going for with a childlike kind of thing, what would happen. But the childlike innocence that came from Peter and the way the other actors and the other characters were responding to that, there was just a lot of things happening, which happen any time when a film starts to come to life. I mean, there's so many new elements that start to happen. And when Rudy asked me how it was going, I said, Rudy, I said, the way it's going with these guys, with these characters, and this happened, I said I could have this guy walking on water at the end of the film. And I said it, and I said, well, I think I will have him walking on water at the end of the film. So that's what I did. And I got the same kind of response with the crew when I did it. You know, one guy said, well, you can't have him walk on water. I said, why? He said, well, the only person that walks on water. I said, who? And he said, well, I said, Jesus, or some guy. He said, yeah. I said, well, maybe, or some other godlike figure, And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what's wrong with any childlike innocence being godlike? You can break it down that way if you want to. Whatever, you break it down for a good laugh. I'm just thankful that the third take we thought of the umbrella. The umbrella was still at the tree on the first two takes. So that's what makes that work, at least for me.
How did you help Peter Sellers prepare for the role?
Just the same I would with anybody. I talked with him just about the different possibilities. Peter likes to go to the voice first. If he can find where the voice, what the sound is, then he gets a better base on the character. Now that's out of his old, radio days and things like that. And when there was a television show that they used to have in England. They used to do so. He used to always do it. Does that with his characters. It's very easy for him to locate the person. And he didn't know what to do with this one. It was very interesting because where is this guy from? Where is he from? So we talked about what the different possibilities of that. You do that kind of thing with him, and just what the level of the child. It was very difficult, but it's something that he has to struggle with himself. All I can do is really observe in the end. If you talk with him, it's very difficult to do that child delivery of lines and not have them sound like bad readings. I mean, it's rough because they can just sound, because they're so simple. You see that they can be that. So we had that consistency to work with. I was just talking with Robert Blumoff before we came in, and so I was talking about Peter's performance, and he said, he was complimenting me on holding him down, not having any of the things that he had from Clouseau and so forth. And I said, I can't remember one conversation where I had to say, hold it down. You know what I mean? So whatever it was and what we were working, it was all preparatory work. It was all talked before and so forth. And anything that we might, as things that come along, the instant things that come along, what's going on with the scene, how you're playing it and so forth. But no, nothing more than that, just the same as I would with anybody. Who wants to go?
Could you comment on your experience working with a script from a writer like Kosinski, in that he's known for his detail and description that he does put into his writing?
I didn't write Jersey's. I didn't shoot his script. I shot Bob Jones's script. Bob Jones didn't get credit for it. The Writers Guild didn't see fit to give him credit for it. And they wouldn't tell me how they judge that. I don't know how they do that. I wish somebody would tell me once. Because the only way I will take what the Writers Guild has to say about who writes a screenplay is if they want to assign somebody would be just like an intern from here. If they want to assign somebody to hang out with me from the time I commit to doing a film to the time that film's finished, and that one wants to tell me who wrote the screenplay, then I'll sit and listen to them. I'll talk to them, but not until. I mean, nobody's going to sit in a room and read some words and tell me who wrote a screenplay. Bob Jones, if you read Jersey's screenplay, you wouldn't believe it compared to what this movie. He was so far away from his book. It was like 10 million miles away from his book, which is fine. I mean, he was 7 years later. He has every right to go away from his book. It was very heavy-handed. I mean, well, all the television stuff the guy was watching was strikes against the Rand Corporation. You know, there you go. Right away, you take put yourself into an unreal place with the thing. You know, and Jersey loves the film, by the way. He's crazy about the film. You know, it's just a problem he has. I mean, he felt that he had to combat, put up his complaint against it. I don't know how the Writers Guild came about it and so forth, as I say, but it was really Bob's script. So it wasn't his detail. I spent I spent 4 weeks writing the script too. You know, I worked very hard with Bob, but I mean, but Bob is the guy who broke the back of it for me. I mean, Jersey script, for Christ's sakes, Louise was talking for 50 pages about where he'd been, where he'd come from. There's a mulatto woman in a photograph somewhere when the old man's dying. I mean, holy God. All that stuff. That's why, so I turned to Bob because I knew Bob from what he does and what he would do. And he'd get down to, he'd give me 117 pages. There were 2 on the nose also, but they were accurate. I knew what I had to film. I mean, I always felt I had to film with the character. I would have shot the book any day. It just would have been tougher to do that. And he got down to it, and he worked it out. And he got rid of all that exposition stuff that had to be there. 90% of it, we were able to, and then we were able to build something that gave it that kind of pace that it had, and so forth. That all came out of the pace of the film. It all came out of the shooting of the film more than the script. Always does. Always ends up there. So I didn't mean to jump and yell and stuff, but he might be noted for. He is noted for his detail. I must say, I have seen his edited manuscripts. They're incredible. I mean, the amount of work that goes into his manuscript when he edits his books and so forth. It's an amazing amount of work that goes into it. But it's a different thing. It's a film. It's a different. They wanted me to cast Ryan O'Neal in the part. That's true. That's who Jersey wanted in the film, was Ryan O'Neal. Had a big, he didn't want Peter to do it. I think I finally convinced him it was a little easier with an older person, to make it all work. Give him a little Kissinger look and so forth. But which is okay too. I mean, all of his ideas are okay. I'm just telling you where they come from with me and where I have to draw the line on the thing, and that kind of thing where you say that. So. I don't know if that answers the question about working with a writer, but yes, sir.
Could I go back to the question about working with Peter Sellers? You said that prior to starting to shoot, you would talk with him and discuss different possibilities. Could you give some examples of what kinds of possibilities you have?
Well, yeah, most of those kind of things. As I said, we talked a lot about the voice thing. I believe I told him, I said probably I would just start with his own, a little bit of what he had in Lolita, of a sound that he had in Lolita, and mixed with his own, because his own sound is to the American ear is culture, even though it isn't. Even it's just an English sound. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't necessarily mean, but it's almost like it means something to our ear. That kind of thing, and just a touch of that. So. We talked about that. We talked about what that level of that child's age was and so forth, and just different possibilities. He loves to. Peter is probably. The best way to describe Peter, when he finished this picture, he went to work on a picture called Fu Manchu, and he was rewriting the script himself, and he called me from Europe one day, and he read me the first 10 pages that he had written, and he did all the parts on the phone for me. I mean, even to FDR, even doing a phone call from FDR, from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and they were all, incredible. So he loves to do that. He's the fastest mimic I've ever seen in my life. I mean, if he meets you, I guarantee you in 30 seconds he can do you. He can. I mean, without ever knowing you, with anything whatsoever. He picks up characteristics and moves. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast he works. I don't know if that takes us anywhere, but we would talk about that kind of thing, and I would watch him work different things out and so forth, But not, it's like, it's a very vague kind of thing that goes on. You talk about, we didn't read the script to each other, do things like that. It's pretty hard to read a script, now he didn't say much.
One detail that
Yeah.
surprised me about his voice was the way he pronounced the word bean.
Bean. Bean. Bean,
He
yes.
said, I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
That, he wouldn't have heard that on TV,
No,
that's for sure.
that's right. Might have. But I don't care if we did or not. That's what I mean. So in other words, it's that kind of thing. That's what I just, that just adds another layer to whatever it is. You know, if it rings a false note with some, you know, nothing I can do about that. But hopefully it will ring just a note of interest. You know, would be the idea. I'll go with that one first, and then I'll come back here.
What's interesting about the change from editor to director is that an editor's life can be very insular, very isolated, almost lonely existence. So how did you find that change from the little dark room where your world is a flickering screen, splices and trim bins, to coming out to dealing with
people?
actors? Yeah.
Well, I was, no, there were two things I was really scared about. When that was how to communicate with the actors. On the first film, I had cast Beau Bridges in it, and I'd been working previously on a film with Beau, so we had become friends. So I felt comfortable. I was working as an associate producer, not as an editor, so you know, I was around the set and so forth, and got to know Beau, and we became friends. So I felt comfortable there, but I didn't really know how I would communicate with the actors, so I was, you know, terrified about that aspect of it. The other was just how much of me would come out in the film, because I really feel strongly about film being a communal art. You know, I mean, I really encourage that from everybody, to try and get as much creativity as I can from everybody that's working on the film. And it took me about 10 seconds, or no, 30 seconds maybe, to watching the film, not to worry about how much of me was going to be on the film, because it would be all me, you know, just as much as it would be everybody else. Because you don't do any film unless you got a reason, unless you want to make it. So once you have a real reason to do it, it'll always be you. Now, as far as with the actors, it took me about 3 days. First day I couldn't talk. You know, I worked myself into a state of walking pneumonia and was just gasping all day and pointing a lot. And I wasn't working with anybody but Beau, so it was easy. but it took me about 3 days to find out that I could communicate with him and talk with him. So I enjoyed it from that point on. Well, I think I got another question, and we'll come back.
Was the Jack Warden character, who he was really excellent at being there, was he sort of your own creation? I mean, was that like Hal Ashby's addition to it? Or was that character written as he came across in the script?
The character was written, the lines are basically what we came out with in the script. The dialogue is the same as what came out in the script. It's just that Jack is such a unique actor. And what happens with Jack's timing is so spectacular and special that no matter what, and as long as he can get the words out, you know, I'm saying it'll take on a reality, and it'll take on something that just nobody else could possibly do. Somebody else might do the words the same way and so forth, but I mean, nobody can look like Jack. Nobody can do the takes like Jack. You know, that was just one of those things. When I had the idea one day about casting for the president, I mean, I just couldn't, from that moment on, couldn't think of anybody else as the president of the United States throughout the whole thing. And the only thing that Jack, I remember, you know, he would always come in with ideas. He's always got a lot of ideas and so forth, but most of them were just little bits of business with things, like wanting to, I think it was originally written in the script that we just had him, when he sat in the library, and he said, I wonder if you had a chance to read my, you know, and Chance says yes. Well, I had him just do it once, I think, on the script, you know, and Jack said, let him have it a couple of times, do it a couple of times. He was right, you know, because it is one of those vague things, and you get that. So it would be that kind of thing, you know, which is easy to let anybody have, because you can always do that too if it doesn't work. The lady in the back.
Talk about your transition from editor to director, and with the landlord, was that your property that you held out to direct, or how
No.
did that happen?
No, it was, I was very fortunate in all of that. I had worked, I reached the point when I started editing, and I knew I was a good editor. I almost settled in there, you know, because I got a lot of gratification. I'd been trained real good, and by Bob Swink, who just taught me everything. And I fought real hard for everything. I always was very rebellious, and I fought real hard because I remember when the first picture I ever cut for Norman Jewison, and he asked me one day if he thought he should come down to the cutting room, and I asked him why. And he said, well, I don't know, maybe to help you pick some takes and things. I said, well, Christ, if you don't trust me, why don't you get somebody else? You go fucking cut the picture. You know, I'm going to cut this picture, and we'll take a look at it and see how it looks, you know. Now, that's other stuff. So I had that relationship with Norman. Norman set the thing up for me in the end. He asked me, when I was settled into the thing, one day he said to me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to direct. That's all I've ever wanted to do. You know, but I hadn't even talked to him about it. I had been with him for 3 pictures by that time. And he said, well, let's find something for you. We were developing The Landlord for him. When, about the time we were just finishing up the shooting on Gaily Gaily. As I said, I was associate producer on that. We got the first 80 pages of the script, and he was just involved at the same time with Nat Turner and Fiddler on the Roof. Both of those things had come to him at the same time. They had great, you know, great appeal. Obviously, he ended up making Fiddler, and he just was great. He just said, "Well, how would you like to do The Landlord?" You know, and I said, "Are you kidding?" You know, like that. I mean, it didn't matter. It didn't matter to me. We had pre-worked on it because I was the last few years when I was from Heat of the Night on, I was like, you know, his assistant, associate editor, you know, real close relationship with him. So it was real good of him in all ways. I mean, I got $2 million to make my first film, you know, and now you need more. That would be, what, $4 million now. You know, $4.5 million now is what it would be, probably. You know, so I got to do that, so I had a lot of help. I got to shoot 65 days. You know, all of the things that one should do, by the way. It doesn't mean that people, because they still, I figure for the $2 million, they got $3 million out of me. You know, $3 million I would never be able to do again. I mean, it's that first picture. I mean, you just, well, I shouldn't say that. I still stay up all night, so. Okay.
Do you approach your films with the editing process in mind? And what is your average shooting ratio?
I shoot a lot of film. And the only editing process I have in mind is how I think the shots are going to look, the juxtaposition of shots. As far as the editing itself, I don't have any preconceived thoughts about it at all. That's why I wanted to do 2 pictures back to back so I could get even further away from any preconceived ideas that would come in at all. I don't think for me, they're just not healthy. I like the spontaneity that goes on in film and work for it that way. And if I shoot, and the ratio is, I don't know, what do I end up with 12,000 feet if I shoot 400,000 feet. So it's a big ratio, 30-something to 1. But I don't edit it as I go along. I wouldn't do that to an editor, first of all. I mean, that's the thing I was talking about with Norman when I'm out in the street. But after I've cut the picture, if you don't like it, then let's do something about it, but not before. I'll get this one back. No, I've got one next to you, see.
Have you ever worked with a director in the editing room with you? Because I know, for instance, Bob Ellis Miller is here. Has been times when he makes a film, he always goes in the editing room.
I go in the editing room. Oh, don't misunderstand. I would never go in the editing room. I would always give what I try to do is encourage any editor that I have working for me to take his first cut and really get into doing that first cut, because that's his shot. I don't know, I mean, it's not that he's not going to contribute from that point on, but that's the way I always looked at it. I mean, by the time I showed, I got to a point like where I was working with Norman. I did Thomas Crown. I didn't go into the editing room until 6 weeks after he'd finished shooting. Now, I never went in the editing room all the time we shot because I knew how I worked. Now, he knew how I worked by that time. Now, when I went in the editing room, I didn't leave it for 7 months. I mean, I literally didn't leave it. I stayed in it. I slept in it. You know, I lived in it for 7 months after that, and I worked that hard on it. But that's what I mean. And when he saw it, I don't know how many months after he finished shooting did he see the thing. But I would give any editor who felt that strongly the same leeway. Unfortunately, not very many of them do. Most of them try to second guess you. Most of them are interested in something else. I don't know what the hell it is. I mean, Bobby Jones is the best editor I ever found, too, actually. I like Donnie and I like everything, but Bobby was the one who just...
Bobby Jones is also the one who wrote?
Yes, he's writing now. That's all he's doing now, but as an editor, he was an editor. I hired on The Last Detail. I hired a young fellow to cut The Last Detail. It was the only time I've ever looked at my film. I looked an hour and 45 minutes and I really almost got ill. I mean, I didn't know what in the hell his point of view was at all, other than trying to use every piece of goddamn film I shot. You know, I mean, Jesus Christ, I'll look at it later. I don't have to see it in the first cut. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't see in the editing process. I couldn't tell you what film was in the first cut, was in Donnie's cut of being there, and what we ended up with. I ended up at 4 o'clock in the morning, the day we opened, making the last change that I can remember. You know, sitting in the cutting room all goddamn night. You know, because we were behind on the thing and so forth. But I mean, the process is the editing process. As I said, I go into the cutting room. One of the things working on 2 pictures was very good for me, because I mean, one of the things that you want to do is you always want to try and get your mind clear. First of all, what you do in the editing process is you go. It has a tendency to go by sequence. In other words, when you go and you sit down, you have such and such a problem. If you discuss it, you discuss it to a certain portion, a certain reel, a certain scene. This is scene by scene usually is what you do when you get up and walk away. And I would do that so I wouldn't become too restless. I have a tendency if I get restless because I physically know how to do it, then so let me do it. You know, and I use that time when I'm doing that to, which I'm going to change. I'm going to start editing everything on tape now. I'm going to get one of those great big goddamn Mach 1 tape editing things with all the $150,000 worth of shit on it, and edit. And nobody does it with nobody edits those the way I shoot film. I'm telling you, it's going to be great. I'm going to be able to explore more goddamn ideas. I don't know if I'll save any time, but I'll sure explore a lot of ideas that would take me. I physically have worked myself into too many holes 4 hours. Later, and have to go back and change it all and do all that on film. I'd just rather punch it up, boy, until I can find out real quick if it works or not.
No people do that with feature films?
Well, not that I know of. I think Kubrick's got a whole system going now. Last I heard that Stanley claims that he can find any line in the picture in any take in 20 seconds. He's got 14 playback machines going. I don't know how many recorders. Yeah. See, the whole thing, I'm just getting into a whole thing about computers and everything. I think that I think it's incredible. I mean, I never took much of a look at them before.
Would you still let the editor edit?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. I let him do it on, I mean, if he's smart, he'd do it on that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Oh, sure. I mean, I would encourage him to do that. So in fact, Mark Warner, who's been working as an assistant with me just past his 5 years, he's been down taking the CMX course and all that stuff, and he's just, you know, wide-eyed and crazy. We're building all that goddamn stuff. He's so excited he can't see straight. And so, you know, he'll be editing he'll getting his first cut on that thing. He'll have to teach me how to work it. I may never be in the editing room truly again. I mean, because I don't physically know how to do that one. This gentleman first.
Do you not even go through and say, I like this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, and now you cut it together?
No.
You don't even do that? You
Of course not. How in the hell can I judge that? I mean, he's got...
The whole real film on him and say, cut it?
Sure. Hell yeah. I mean, you got to be a big boy. Well, he does, because look, he's the one who looks at it. I watch the actors do it. And I get certain impressions of it. And any good film, I mean, Jesus Christ, if you aren't, it's the 4th time you see it, the 5th time you see it, that you start seeing stuff that you never saw before that's there. Stuff happening with people, with actors, things like that. Now, that's his job. That's what he sits down and that's what he looks for. Film will tell you how to edit it. The film will tell you what to do in the end. I can't sit there and say, I can say, oh, sometimes you look at me, but Jesus Christ, if I print 4 takes up and one of them so obviously much better than the other 3, what the hell am I printing the other 3 for? You know what I'm saying? I mean, they should all have, the only difference between them should be subtleties. And that's the reason once in a while there'll be a line that's blown or something like that. But then he's the one who investigates the film. He's the one who sits there the first time. I investigate it later. I can tell you, the week before we opened this picture, Charles can tell me, I bet you I put in, the last week before I opened Being There, the opening, I bet you I put in 50 new pieces of film in that picture. Had never been in the picture before. You know, now that's part of that process too, because I'm searching stuff out, and you're just pursuing different ideas.
They were there after the things cut together. How do you remember that you had on take 11B that you had a different reading on that?
How do you remember?
Yeah.
By how it moves you.
It's all cut together there, and you got to go back into the room, go find that piece of film.
Sure, that's your
stick it back
job.
in there.
It's your job.
So you're saying that
That's your job. It sticks. Some of it sticks. Some of it doesn't stick. Film should be, don't ever stop. If you're editing film, don't ever stop searching it. Make your film so goddamn good as you see something in it all the time. I mean, get new ideas every goddamn time you run a piece of film. Every son of a bitch time you sit down and thread up a goddamn reel and you punch a button and you start to look at it and get a different idea. And whether you pursue it or not doesn't matter. But let the film, and it's the film that will give you the idea. And so you're not going to sit there and say, now what idea can I impose on this? Something will happen in that film. When you're running it, whether it's a close shot, it's a full shot, whatever it is, something will happen, you'll say, oh, that's nice. Boy, that's good. Gee, wouldn't it be interesting? And then away you go. You know, and that process never stops. It should never stop. That's why I don't go look at films anymore. I went last night to see the picture because I put a whole new end credit on the end of the picture, which I wished I'd had for all of you to see. It was interesting. Not one person left the theater before the end credits were finished last night. And one guy got up and walked up the aisle and he turned around and stood there and watched for the whole 3 minutes. So it was interesting. I don't know if it takes us out of the picture or not, but it sure held their attention. So, but I went to see the picture last night, and, you know, and I couldn't sit in there for more than 10 minutes at a goddamn time. I see too fucking much I want to do. Oh shit! I wish I'd trimmed now. I should. Oh Jesus! Oh boy! You know, I mean, it never stops. The only picture I've gone to see after it's been released, I went a couple of years ago to see Harold and Maude when they re-released it. When Finley got new prints and they re-released it, and Peter wanted to go. As a matter of fact, so it wasn't even that long ago. It was when we were just starting to pre-work on being there. And he said, "Let's go down." We went down to the theater and we saw it, and it was a real treat. I couldn't remember, for Christ's sake, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever the hell it was. I would say, well, geez, I wonder what version I have in here at this point. And sometimes I'd say, oh, my God, I thought I took that out. Or, Jesus, did I lose that? You know, I mean, some of those things. I mean, that was going through my mind while I was watching that picture that many years later. But I was continually surprised by it. You see, what happens with me when I start, this is why when I look at editing a film, I get when I look at a first cut, I get very tired. Because I don't take any notes or anything. You just start on reel one. It's just such a mass of work to do that you start on reel one. Being there, I looked at the first cut the end of May. The next time I ran the picture was the end of September. So it took me June, July, August, most of September. Now, I was working on the other picture at the same time, so it would have been I really got screwed up on those times. It would have been normally about 2.5 to 3 months would be the next time, by the time I got through those 16 reels. You know what I'm saying? Because that's when you sit down and you start, and that wasn't even totally searching the film out. I mean, that was just kind of shaking it out.
I have two questions. One is the scene with Melvyn Douglas dictating to the computer. Did that come out of your fascination with computers, where it's printing out on a screen?
That came out of Mike Haller's fascination with computers. No, Mike, you know, when we talked about the picture originally with Mike, who's the designer of the film, I talked very early on about having it up to date as possible, and in his thought process in that having it up to date as possible to invent something that's probably 10 years off, as far as it probably isn't that far off, but to have something. It worked real good too, because I got a call from Steven Spielberg, who wanted to buy one of those.
Do you care to comment on your working relationship with Mr. Deschanel?
My working relationship with him?
Yes.
God, what good words could I say about him? I've known him for years. I met him on The Landlord. He was a student at SC. He came back to meet Gordy Willis, as a matter of fact, and I met him back there in New York. I think Matthew Robbins was with him. And I always kept track of Caleb. Mike Haller went to help him with a film that he did in Valley Forge. And it was Mike told me that he was in the Union. He was up shooting graffiti too. When I just finished Secondhand Hearts, and I said, I called him and said, you got to come and do the film. I mean, he's incredible. I couldn't find words to tell you what I think about him.
Was he involved in the pre-production as far as the look that you wanted to arrive
Absolutely.
at for the film?
Absolutely. Oh, he was involved. He's still involved.
How much time did he have before the film to work?
I don't know how much I gave him. I think I gave him, he must have had, I don't know how many weeks, because I'm kind of confused. I finished shooting the one in October, and I started shooting in January. So he must have come on in November there, sometime, I would think. I remember that because we went around. We went back to Newport, and we spent a lot of time, you know, going over stuff together. So I would think it was quite a while. Caleb, I know it was. He just puts a lot of time in. He puts a lot. As I say, he's still working. He's still looking at prints. Huh?
What's he doing?
Looking at prints and going crazy with the lab, and so I mean, between MGM and Technicolor, and I mean, Technicolor has a contract with United Artists to do all their release prints, and Eastman Kodak has come out with a new stock, print stock, which Technicolor is totally geared over to. I mean, that's all they can do is the new print stock. So we went to, Caleb got into it, started checking it out. Gordy checked it out, and Caleb got into it, and he first thought they were just losing off the high and off the low end. And then we got into it, all of a sudden the middle, the whole goddamn contrast became mushy, and I mean, this was ridiculous. So he wrote letters, and you know, just started complaining about it. And I even got to a point where I stood with these people. I said, if Technicolor releases this goddamn movie, I'm not making any more movies here. That's all. I mean, I so got very quiet, you know, and I said, well, Jesus, we're going to, you know, I said, yeah. You know, that kind of thing. So, but you do that, you know, and I mean, and I don't do that too often. I mean, I'll do it when I feel, I mean, that's how strongly I felt about it. So we said, because he ran a lot of tests and everything. I mean, it wasn't just something offhand. I mean, he ran tests, you know, gave the same negative to Technicolor and to MGM. And so we got it, where MGM was going to do it, and Caleb went to scout some locations for his film for 4 days, and said, now this is, and then Technicolor said, now then they got interested. Once I really put the foot down, they found out they weren't going to get the 600 goddamn print order, they got interested. So they said, well, now we want to really do a different test and so forth, and up at the internegative, and so I said, okay, go ahead and make some more tests. And Caleb told me, Jim, this is your shot, you guys. You know, I mean, be sure what you send over for them to look at is the comparison reel to give them a good one. And the next thing I know, Caleb is back, and Technicolor has made a print, and the comparison reel that MGM sent over has got a printer jiggle in it to start with. Remember, they pulled one out and didn't even look at it, just sent it over. You know, so then it went all through it, and you know, Technicolor came up with a better print because they were hand working the goddamn thing. So that's what he's going through. He's going through all this nonsense and all this madness to a point now we're looking for a couple of people that want to open a lab. We're going to build a goddamn lab. We are.